road there.
Cool.
That was there.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
It was a great week, though.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I was awesome at Old Bethpage Grade School. I used to do the bus announcements, and I turned the color of the buses into a rhyme, like mellow yellow. The next bus is yellow or something, which actually isn't a rhyme, I guess.
Did you find out like?
I just had that memory of me like going down, like even as a young, like little pipsqueak elementary school kid, I was just a kiss ass and was doing the morning announcements at my.
See, I envisioned the other way.
School.
I envisioned you like finding out who was the worst bus driver and reporting that he was going to be fired within 2 weeks.
No. And it was just, I was telling this story too. Like, I don't know, my brother was just in town, and so like he went to the same grade school as me afterwards when I went to like Matlin Middle School, and he hated all the teachers that I loved there, which I think says about our kind of, like the way that we were in school. I was like the kiss ass. Like even in high school, like I had the get out of jail free card. I would just like honestly like get up and walk out of the room and go like set up a pep rally or something. So yeah, it was cool.
Good times.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for moving the podcast to about 2 blocks from my house.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Helps me out a lot.
Good
I've been
deal.
tweeting you incessantly for years. My question is,
what's the concert that they do in Prior Lake every summer? What is it?
Yeah, Lakefront.
Yeah, I was driving here. I passed that. I'd been to it once. I saw like OAR and Eric Hutchinson.
Yeah, they got quite a few good bands.
Yeah. It was, I love that place. So.
Yeah. So my question is, you mentioned last week that Fenton might throw Rask in for, kind of try to get rid of him this summer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it'd be worse for Fenton to throw him in as kind of like a try to get rid of him, or to give him a chance next year?
The problem with the giving him a chance is that unless there's injuries, I don't see how he gets that chance. It's like, I think they'd love to give him a chance to become a player this year, but if you look at the depth chart, if healthy, there's no way he's in the top 9, so it's also unfair to Rask. How do you expect him to produce if he's not going to be on the power play? He's going to be on the 4th line. You're just still saying it's a guarantee that you'd buy him out in 2 years. So, another option is just keeping Rask as almost insurance if Mikko is hurt and not ready to start the year. So that's another thing. So I think this is stuff they're weighing. I think it's going to be difficult. He tried all last year to throw Ennis into a deal at this time, and he wasn't able to do it, and eventually had to buy him out. They're not going to buy out Rask, I don't think. And so I think they're going to just exhaust every attempt to try to throw him in a deal. And if they can't, they'll just come back and he'll be kind of injury insurance all year long. But it's a tough situation because a lot of times when you throw a guy like Rask in, you're either throwing him in with Zucker into an inferior type of deal coming back, and he's kind of the asset, or you're just taking another team's problem back, which could become your problem immediately. So it's tough. It's a quandary. There's no doubt about it.
Good questions. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. A couple Twitter questions here from our friend Bill.
Another just real quick Adam Russo story.
Yes.
I think I told these guys, it just popped in my head, but I think you'll like this. So even in high school, I was when I was covering preps at the Sun Sentinel, I was an absolute savage. How about that? And so Olympic.
Savage in what way?
So I was going to Spanish River High School, and my brother. So at my high school, just hopefully you could follow along here. So I grew up in Boca Raton. I went to Spanish River. My senior year of Spanish River, they opened up a high school that was like a half a mile from my house, Olympic Heights. Well, they didn't have they didn't want to make seniors have to leave their high school their senior year. So my brother's freshman year at Olympic Heights, there was no senior class. So I was still at my school of 4,200 kids, by the way, and I think there were 1,200 in my class. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
It's like YZ or something. So I'm a student at Spanish River High School working for a major newspaper. You know the Sun Sentinel down there.
Yeah.
Back when I was working for it, it was huge.
Back
it
then.
was one of the best papers, sports sections in the country. And I'm covering high school.
Till Russo got there.
And I'm 17 years old at the rival high school where my brother goes. And in Boca Raton, there's a ton of high schools. Now there's even more, but there's Pope John Paul, St. Andrews, Boca Raton High, Spanish River, and Olympic Heights. And I had befriended all these coaches and from the other schools. So this one coach from one school, this was 20-something years ago, so I don't think I'm giving away sources. He was a coach whose wife worked at my brother's school and was disgusted by the fact that the principal of this school, I won't say his name, even though I want to, was changing grades of star players. And actually, I was working on this for months, okay? So, again, my brother goes to this school. I'm not telling him about it. They're 10-0. They're about to go into the district playoffs. So undefeated season, guaranteed state championship contending team. I come out with this huge story that their 2-star players had Fs turned into As with the change of grade forms in the paper. In 1 minute at school, their 10-0 season became 0-10, and they were disqualified by the state as my brother was in the football coach's class at the time. So he didn't like me in high school. He hated me. My brother despised me. And that was the second time I took down his high school, to the point that, Adam was telling Brian and Andy here the other day that, he would be in school and hear, people, basically threatening me. And one day I showed up at a soccer game at the school. They wouldn't let me in. So, it was just, yeah. But there was not one part of me that thought that, boy, this could put my brother in an unenviable position. So, another real funny story. So, I'm covering Atlantic High School, and I think I told you guys this story the other day too. So, Atlantic High School, I won't use names, but they had this first-year coach that was from Jacksonville, where Chipper Jones went to school, Jacksonville Bulls. And his first year at Atlantic High School, they were supposed to be a state contender. On the morning, I'll just say it. On the morning of basically the start of the season, they have a kid. I won't say his name actually, who was ineligible. And so he couldn't play all year for Atlantic High. So they get off to Christmas. They're off to a 1-13 start. Christmas tournament, they go up to Jacksonville. And again, if you're young here, you probably don't realize that you couldn't go on the internet years ago, and you didn't have a cell phone and all this stuff. So I think these coaches just thought they can get away with murder. They go up to Jacksonville, this 1-13 team, and win a Christmas tournament. So right away, it didn't even take much thinking by me. I'm they had to use this ineligible player, because he was one of the best players in the state before he was ineligible. So I called the Jacksonville Times-Union, and I say to the reporter there, I'm like, hey, do you know, can you send me the box scores for Atlantic High's games? I like to just see who the heck scored. And I look, and there's this guy on the game sheets named Johnson. They don't have a Johnson on their team. And every game he was 28-13, 32-10, And so now I call them up. I'm like, hey, did your photographer happen to take any pictures of this player? And they're like, oh, yeah. So they faxed it down to me. I look at it right away, and it's the player that was ineligible. So I write this huge story. The coach gets fired. They're now, done. They've been ineligible by the state. So it was I honestly could not walk to, so it became a point. It was the best thing for my career because, one, it showed my newspaper that I was a Bulldog, but two, I could not walk into most high schools in South Florida because I was going to get killed. So they're like, why don't you cover the Florida Panthers? So that's how it went. I don't know why this all popped in my head. So,
anything else you want to get off your chest?
No. Isn't it funny how careers start though? You couldn't. We've talked about this before. You can't follow most routes that I talk to these kids all the time. How do I become a sports writer? I'm like, I have no freaking clue how you do. How do you? In today's day and age.
I went to a really good journalism school, and then I ignored all my advisors who told me go to a small paper and kind of work your way up, learn how to do everything. I went to the biggest paper I could, got the worst job I could, made $6 an hour, and that's the thing. People tell you ask you how do you start your career. I have no idea how to do it the right way. And I also know a lot of people who did everything right, went to a good journalism school, went to a small paper, went to a medium, and really didn't end up doing as well as I thought they would.
Yeah. Well, also young sports writers today, it's like they feel it's almost beneath them to cover preps when that's how you learn.
No, that's
that's how you learn how to break news. Like I was just saying with those other schools, or develop sources, or
plus
walk the sidelines.
You keep your own scores, and you have to get to know everybody.
It's the hardest job in sports writing because you don't have a PR guy sitting there and giving you information and stats. You're keeping it yourself in the pouring rain, things like that. I remember one semester at University of Florida. I was working for the Sun Sentinel, still covering UF, but I was driving out to Williston, freelancing for the Williston Sun Swanee Valley News was the name of it, covering Williston High School, just these games. So, how'd we get on the subject?
You just started talking.
Yeah, I know.
You started talking, and I stopped, and that's kind of how the show works.
Yes. All right.
Twitter question from our friend Bill, who we hope we get to see out at a live show. He brings his father sometimes.
Yeah.
It was really cool to see them at our last joint. From Bill, I'm convinced Fenton is going to trade Eriksson Ek this summer in order to reshape the roster. With so few centers in the pipeline, shouldn't that raise his value to near untradeable unless a young center in his prime is part of the return?
Yeah, I mean, depends what you think he's going to be. I don't know. I don't know if Joel Eriksson Ek is untradeable. I mean, definitely not. But you're right. I mean, the question is, what's your return for him? I can't imagine his value is super, super high right now. It'll be interesting. One guy I didn't put in the trade target thing because I essentially didn't want to start a rumor, but another one is like they're working hard to get Brock Besser a new contract in Vancouver right now, and if it's untenable, I mean, potentially he's on the move. I could tell you that Minnesota has talked to Vancouver, and they kind of laughed him off the phone. But there could come a point there. I don't know why that popped in my head, but I do think that they have to change their centers. I mean, and they don't. And not that Brock Nelson is a dynamic center, and Brock Nelson is kind of the classic guy that you might overpay because he had a really good year and he's going to come here and not be nearly the same guy. But there just comes a point, I'll tell you right now, I was talking to Hitchcock today, and Hitchcock, when they won the Cup in '99, he had Modano, Neuendijk, and Jason Arnott as his centers. I mean, that's insane. And the Wild have, Stahl, who's on the downslope, Koivu's coming off a major knee injury, Eriksson Ek, and Victor Rask, maybe. I mean, they've got to improve the centers. And Fenton knows this, by the way, which is why I just have this feeling that this summer he's going to try to improve the center core. And again, it's why it just absolutely contradicts what he was trying to do at the deadline at, re-signing Stahl. And everybody, I think, knows that at the beginning of the year I was a proponent on signing Stahl. But, the way he played in the second half, it's alarm, man. It just wasn't good. So, and it pains me to say that because he is as good a person as I've ever covered. But man, it was a hard second half for him. And what was really, to me, the red flag is I think that comes because Mikko's hurt. And that's why it's like they, now you have two older guys there that are going to get big time matchups, and they've just got to improve that center position and have more threats so Stahl doesn't get those hard minutes.
From James Haluka, I hope I'm getting your name right. What kind of return could we see out of Spurgeon or Zucker?
Well, I mean, Zucker could be all over the map. You could go pick some prospects just to go and replace him in free agency, or you could use him to try to get the Phil Kessels of the world or something like that. In terms of Spurge, I mean, this is an interesting situation. He definitely, for the right financial package, will sign here, but it's not just going to be the financial package. He needs to be sold that there is a path to winning. For the first time, years ago when you talked to Jared Spurgeon, he's like, I just want to live here for the rest of my life. I'm going to be a Wild for the rest of my life. And it's not that simple anymore. Careers are short. He's 30. And I think that he's looking at the situation as kind of like, he's probably looking at Zach Parise as Ryan Suter with a little sympathy. These guys are locked in for 6 more years. Not that anybody should feel sorry for these guys, but they've got no out. Where, Spurgeon's like, I could be all of a sudden Suter and Parise and lock up the rest of my career here and not have a path to winning. And I think that is something that he's paying attention this summer. So right now, as of now, maybe it's because Shep Harder's been fired and Chris O'Hearn's still getting his feet wet. But there's been no negotiations between Jared Spurgeon and Minnesota Wild. And it just seems like you want to get that started because if all of a sudden the parameters of a new deal for Spurge is something that you're not willing to stomach, the time to trade him is the draft. If they go into next season with Spurge, you're just not going to get nearly the value, in my opinion, that you could get now for him. And which is another scary thing because trading Jared Spurgeon, I just can't imagine that you're going to get better on the blue line. But to get to his question, there are teams that need right shot defensemen like Jared Spurgeon. I mean, you could probably get a good haul for him. But again, I worry about their back end and what would happen there. So I just think that, they should probably start those negotiations now. And it's interesting. I mean, I think that Jared Spurgeon, there's a case for him to get more than Suter, and Suter makes 7.538. I'm sure if you're Paul Fenton, you're going to throw Ryan Ellis's name at Eustace King, who I think makes 6.25, 6.5. Their comparables or numbers are pretty accurate, are pretty on par. But I've got to think that if Eustace does his job, that a new contract for Spurge here would be 5 times 7, 6 times 7, something like that.
From Regis Hopper, Phil the Thrill would be the leading goal scorer, along with being the Wild's best power play guy and the best forward on the Wild, too. Agree?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I don't think he's going to age gracefully, but the good news is that he's sometimes on a team. If you look at his career, he's got a kind of a 2.5 year, 3 year expiration date. A lot of players that have played next to